And most important of all, rivers are resilient, and that is something I really love about them. One of my favorite memories is going back more than a decade when I was in Augusta, Maine in July of 1999 for the removal of the Edwards Dam on the Kennebec River. That dam had been there for 164 years. Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote about salmon butting their noses into that dam. That just gives you a way to think about how long it had been there. And yet, within a season, when that dam had been removed, salmon were back to their prime spawning habitat. The river had recovered, and great things were happening. And so that's really, if of all the things that I love about rivers, I think it's that resilience, that capacity for restoration that gives me a sense of hope. It gives me a sense that even in the face of just all the things that we're up against in the 21st century, that rivers, we give them a little bit of help and they will pay us back through their ability to become restored. So anyhow, those are the kinds of things that have kept me going at this subject all these years, and I think will keep me going for many more, I hope. So I've come to the Department of Interior at the end of a fairly long career already. I'd been in, as Wendy said, I'd been in the conservation movement for 30 years prior to coming to the department. And when I first moved to Washington, I actually was really dream come true to work for Gaylord Nelson. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember Gaylord, but he was the founder of Earth Day, just a champion of the conservation movement when he was governor in Wisconsin and when he came to the United States Senate and served there for 3 terms. So working for him as his environmental legislative aide was just extremely special and what I think really put me solidly on this course. And so to sort of end up my career now at the department is an equally treasured moment and something I feel very honored and privileged to be working for Secretary Salazar. If there is a bigger champion for rivers in the United States government, I don't know who that would be. He truly believes in the value of rivers and the importance of the job that the Department of the Interior is doing with respect to protecting and restoring and making rivers assets for our communities all across the country, whether we're talking about human communities or wildlife, natural communities. So you all probably know that a couple of years ago, in the spring of 2010, President Obama launched a conservation initiative with a lot of help from Secretary Salazar called America's Great Outdoors, and that's become the signature conservation initiative of this administration. So that was the spring of 2010, and to determine what was going to be part of this initiative, many listening sessions were held across the country. And one of the things that came up time after time after time was how important rivers are to the American communities. And so what happened as a result of all of that groundswell of support is that when the America's Great Outdoors Initiative was sort of stood up and established, it was built on 3 pillars, and one of those 3 pillars is rivers. And I'll just tell you the other two. One of the other two is urban parks, and the third one in this trilogy is large landscapes. But rivers were one of 3 pillars, and so Secretary Salazar, I'm sure, had something to do with that, in addition to all of the citizens who spoke up about rivers. But time passed, and I came to the department last August, and in January of this year, Secretary Salazar decided that he wanted to launch a specific rivers initiative as part of America's Great Outdoors. And so he asked me to do some thinking about that, had me work with a number of colleagues from across the department to think through what it might be. And in January, the very end of January, this was announced. So we've only been in business for a handful of months, but we're moving at a fast pace because we know the clock is short that we have a lot of work to get done before the end of the year. So we've been at work for a few months now. We have sort of two broad areas of endeavor. One is river recreation, making rivers more accessible and making them valued assets to communities. And the second area is river restoration, rivers as habitat, rivers as migration corridors. So those are the two sides of the initiative, the recreation side and the restoration side. And it's because rivers have these qualities that I was alluding to moments ago. I mean, they're great ways to connect people to the out of doors. They're close to home for every community. They are great wildlife habitat, and they allow people a chance to get involved, whether they're coming just for a weekend or an afternoon river cleanup, or maybe they're going to get involved in something much larger, like 60 years of effort on the Connecticut River watershed. People have things that they can do on a volunteer basis or as a public servant to get involved with rivers. So we have a sort of a three-part strategy for this initiative, again, with very short time and very limited resources. We've chosen to focus on doing three kinds of things. One is demonstration projects, highlighting projects that are worthy models, sort of showing the way by picking out some projects around the country. The second thing we want to do is make it easier, find ways through some of the new technology to collect up the tools and services and abilities that are already out there and make it easier for both our own colleagues within the federal family, but also the people we work with at the state and local level and in the grassroots to access the things that we have available to us in the way of technical knowledge and capacities and some grant monies as well. Excuse me. And the third element of this strategy is inspiration, so that we can put these ideas out there through stories and through events and through gatherings, and hopefully give other communities the idea that, hey, we have a river, and maybe we could have some of that good stuff in our community as well. So show the way, make it easier, and inspire involvement. That's sort of the three parts of our strategy. At this point, we've stood up a few program elements. Wendy referred to one. We've picked out a project in each of the 50 states, plus the districts. We have 51 All-American River projects around the country. The way we got these projects is that we asked Fish and Wildlife Service, National Park Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Bureau of Reclamation to look across their river-related projects and sort of lift up the ones that they thought would make good models to be these demonstrations of what we're doing and some of the best stuff that we're doing. So we got a lot of nominations from across the country. We had to go through a winnowing process and a selection process because we only had one slot per state. And we tried to get some diversity, too. We tried to have different kinds of projects, different kinds of problems that were being attacked. Anyhow, we ended up with 51 projects. And 2 weeks ago, we had our rollout where every day for 5 days, we put out a press release and identified the projects in 5 different regions of the country. So those projects are all out there. Again, they were projects that were nominated by the bureaus, so they're already up and running. We have a leader in each case. We're working with the leader to make sure that we are going to really learn the lessons of these projects, capture what they know, and make it available, share it with others. So that's one part of the work. And within that work, there's lots of, Wendy mentioned 13, 14 programs, projects up here in New England, many of which are being led by the Fish and Wildlife Service, many of which have to do with fish passage. So a lot of what you do is reflected in these projects. We have, so that's one element. A second element, I'm sort of doing these somewhat chronologically. That's how they're occurring to me anyway. We worked with the National Park Service to put out a new and improved program around national water trails. So there have been national water trails as part of the National Recreation Trail system for many, many years. But the Park Service decided, as part of this emphasis in America's Great Outdoors, of emphasis on recreation and conservation, to try to take that program and really upgrade it. And they worked very hard. They identified half a dozen best management practices that they're applying to these trails. They've created, or they're in the process of creating, a community of mentors for the trails. So they're doing a lot of work to sort of make these more valuable, more sustainable, more higher value assets to the communities that are going forward to get a National Water Trail designation. A third element is this new idea of a new, sort of a back to the future, new old idea, I guess, of national blueway system. This is a new approach to rivers. Most river protection, conservation, recreation programs look at rivers on a segment basis, and they tend to just look at a fairly narrow riparian corridor, maybe a quarter mile on either side of the river. And so when we were looking around to implement the Secretary's vision for rivers, we asked ourselves, what could we come up with that would be truly additive to the options that are currently on the table? And actually, it was the Conti Refuge that inspired us and gave us the concept, gave us the model and the vision of what we wanted to do. So it was right here in this region that we found our idea. And it was with a lot of help from Andy French, by the way, so he also deserves a lot of thanks. But the idea is to look at rivers from headwaters to mouth or confluence, and to look across the watershed of the river, and to approach this from an integrated basis, integrating the land and the water management, and bringing together the practitioners who have responsibility for the land and the water, and trying to get that in a collaborative, integrated approach, and to do it with really strong stakeholder partnerships. Again, the Friends of Conti, which, if you aren't familiar, is an association of more than 40 organizations that are working together, who have come together to talk about how to proceed with the Conti Refuge, 7.2 million acres in terms of the legislated project area. So those are the elements of a national blueway: that it's watershed-wide, that it's integrated land and water, and that it's community-based and really has an active stakeholder partnership across the watershed. And so we've just announced the system. It's still being developed, constructed, if you will. We went ahead and named the first system, the first blueway, because, as I said, the Conti is the inspiration for all of this. We hope to have several other pilots around the country, many of which will have Fish and Wildlife Service involvement in other regions. So we want to take the ideas that we've developed here in New England and make sure that they work in the Southeast, in the Northwest, and the West. We're going to be developing an awards program that is at least inspired by the LEED system, if you know LEED, which is a program by which buildings and developments can be judged for their environment and energy quality. And so that's an idea that we won't just lift it entirely, but we'll be looking at that as an inspiration in terms of having criteria in different categories, and having a voluntary self-evaluation process that will lead to a nomination, will be evaluated, and we hope it'll be a very prestigious award that something that communities really want to work to be able to get this award. And we hope that it will certainly come with a lot of high-level support. Secretary Salazar is reaching out to other cabinet secretaries. We hope to have an MOU that goes across a number of the most important partners, certainly Department of Agriculture, Army Corps of Engineers, EPA. So we're hoping that this will be something that will not just be a prestigious award, although that's an important part of it, but that will bring a lot of value to the communities that come together to seek one of these nominations. A couple of other things I'll mention. We are hoping to create a web-based one-stop shop where we collect up tools and services and hopefully a directory of people across the department within the key bureaus who know something about rivers, so that we could have an annotated directory of people who would be good resources when you're working on a project and have a question and are looking for somebody who might have this expertise. And we're also working on developing, again, I mentioned a moment ago around Blueways, but more generally developing MOUs with other agencies. I worked on one with the Fish and Wildlife Service again early on, getting an MOU between Agriculture and Commerce and the Department of the Interior for the National Fish Habitat Action Plan. And that was something that we were able to get signed, and hopefully that will do a lot of good in supporting the private-public fish habitat partnerships across the country. So we're working hard to get these kinds of elements stood up, and I can't say for sure what the future of all of this work is going to be. It's a little bit early for me to know that, although if I were here in 2 weeks, I probably would have more of a sense, because the Secretary is giving a lot of thought to how to ensure this work over the long term, and I know those conversations are starting, and so stay tuned. We'll be figuring this out as we go forward. But I think that's probably adequate run-through of what we're up to, so I would be glad to try to answer any questions.